My name's Lucy McDowell and I work for the Wellcome Trust's Broadcast Games and Film team. Now, the Wellcome Trust, I don't know if you know about them, but they're a global charitable foundation, and they're fundamentally interested in helping great ideas to thrive. And frankly, what better home of ideas than DocFest? Now, today we have a luminary in conversation, no stranger to DocFest, Charlie Phillips, now head of docs at The Guardian, and Erinma Ochu, previous Wellcome Trust Public Engagement Fellow. Now, before we start, just if anybody has any problems hearing this, particularly those at the back, we do actually have some roving wireless headphones, so if you need someone, grab a member of the crew. And over to Erinma and Charlie.
So, Charlie, thanks for getting involved in this session.
It's fine.
You are a DocFest luminary. How does that feel?
I don't know what it means. I don't really know what a luminary is, but I'm pleased to. I like talking.
Excellent.
So I'm pleased to be given an opportunity to talk.
Fantastic. That's good enough for me. But these luminary slots are about people that are really passionate about documentaries and have been for years, which you have, and can provide some insights into the future of documentary filmmaking. How's your DocFest been so far?
It's been great. You can tell by my voice that this is what always this always used to happen in all the years that I worked here, and I thought that when I left, I'd be able to get through a festival able to talk properly. But I think it's just what happens to your voice in Sheffield. But no, it's been great. I've been doing lots of meetings, seen some films. It's been as inspiring as it always is.
Were there any films that particularly captured your interest?
I'm cheating a bit because these are films that I saw before the festival, but I really love Kiki and Striker Pose, the two voguing or ballroom films, and I thought the Vogue party last night was exceptional. As everyone knows, like DocFest is a lot about the parties, and that was one of the things that we initiated when we were running the festival. So that sort of combination of a really powerful, visionary doc with a really fun party that kind of takes on the spirit of the doc is really exciting.
Cool. And then your role at Guardian as head of documentaries. I think most people know that you were at Sheffield DocFest prior to that, but your role now, tell us a little bit about that role.
So my job title is head of documentaries at The Guardian. I kind of am the documentaries department as well.
It's you.
So it is me. I am the head of one-man department, but that's fine. Doesn't really matter.
Did you pick your title?
I actually did pick my job title, which seems really big-headed. But at that time, I thought I might have more people working alongside me. But so I commission shorts. Documentaries for The Guardian website. Everyone knows The Guardian, obviously. It's one of the most visited news websites in the world, and I was brought in to devise a strategy for us commissioning and distributing short documentaries online.
So that wasn't in place at all before you came?
It kind of was and it wasn't. Like the Guardian had always done a lot of video, but had done it in maybe a less strategic way than it should have done. So under the previous head of video, Merapi, she brought in me to do the documentaries and reconfigured the role of the head of news video, brought in a couple of other people to do other specific slots, and it was kind of a general push into being more serious about video being central to the Guardian's future. And certainly in terms of documentaries, where they'd existed before on The Guardian, they were very, very newsy, very much current affairs-esque, and so they specifically wanted someone to come in with a documentary background who could bring in talent from all around the world who had access to really impressive stories and who could tell those stories in a different kind of language. So I was given a very vague brief when I started, and I've been there 18 months and I'm still figuring out what we're doing and still experimenting, but that's quite a privilege to be able to do that.
And what made you think about making that leap from working at a festival and developing talent and finding talent that could get involved in making documentaries to making that springboard into The Guardian? Did they come looking for you, or...?
Yeah, I mean, the really boring basic thing is that they came to me and they offered me the job. But I guess I'd done 7 festivals, and I ran the Meat Market. People probably know that, the big pitching forum here. And so I'd seen close up the development of the online space and alternative commissioners. And I'd spent a lot of time with decision makers, and I'd seen that there was a definite change in how filmmakers wanted to work with commissioners and other decision makers. And so I was quite interested in trying to evolve the definition of what a commissioner is, and maybe, which fundamentally for me means being a more supportive kind of commissioner and being a more collaborative commissioner. And that was very much what The Guardian wanted. They didn't want to replicate broadcast commissioning. So it was quite an exciting prospect. And of course it was a totally new platform for being able to put out documentaries. And that was exciting, because I'd always been intrigued by the idea of being a commissioner, but I didn't really want to work for a broadcaster. Not because I don't have any respect for that, but I think TV is going in one very particular direction with docs, and it's not necessarily a direction that I would want to be a part of, even though I respect it. So it was kind of an interesting way to try and forge a new direction.
And then thinking about shorts, when we spoke, you mentioned that you'd started out at, you'd done work with 4Docs and short films, and then here you are with short. Is there a kind of connection or journey from that position?
I mean, kind of. This is the slot that I commissioned. We're about to redesign this platform so it won't look quite as blocky. So I was the editor of 4Docs between. It was like 2006, 2008, I think. And 4Docs was Channel 4's user-generated documentary platform where anyone could upload a 4-minute documentary. It was totally open. It was all user-generated. And then some of them progressed onto Channel 4 in the old 3-minute wonder slot. And some of them just helped to develop people's careers. And that was good. So I suppose that showed me the possibilities of online exhibition for documentary, but it was now it seems like ancient history. It was pre-YouTube when I first started. It was an exciting experiment for Channel 4, but by the end of my time there, I think they just weren't really sure how it was really going to progress talent into being more mainstream TV directors. So I think it wasn't really working for them. But there was definitely something residual in me that felt like that idea of being an open access documentary platform was something quite exciting. And also through 4Docs I did training programs and helped to develop new talent. And then that was something that continued throughout my time at Sheffield. I did all of our workshops. And that was something I suppose that I was excited about also bringing into The Guardian, about trying to bring in new voices and maybe not commission like the obvious kind of documentary makers who get all of the opportunities.
Yeah. Let's get a sense from the audience of how many people here are making shorts and in the online space. All right, so we need to leave enough time for questions, and so be ready with your questions. And I wondered, kind of now in the era of the internet, looking back to that time of doing the work that you did at 4Docs and the opportunity now, so the kind of partnerships that you've been developing, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, just going back to talking about 4Docs, it seems so primitive, technically, so it was really hard to get people's films uploaded to us, and it was really hard to get them on the website, and Channel 4, would never have let us have the films on any other platform. It was all about hosting them on Channel 4, and the idea of those films going on YouTube would have been, if I'd suggested that, I would have been absolutely laughed out. Now our films, yes, they go on The Guardian, but they also all go up on YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook. We've just done a partnership with Amazon Prime. They get syndicated to lots of other partners like AOL and MSN and Yahoo. And so it's about, the off-platform views often dwarf the on-platform views. And that's really crucial because you have to take the films to where people are actually likely to watch them. And no matter how good the films are that we make, and no matter how much time I spend on them, our audience aren't necessarily expecting to find documentaries on the Guardian website, whereas they are expecting to find documentaries on Facebook, let's say.
And so to have that conversation then at the Guardian about actually, yes, we're putting it on the Guardian platform, but it's also going to. Was that just?
Well, that wasn't my decision. That's core to the Guardian's business model, because we want to maximise the biggest possible audience on as many platforms as possible, and we don't necessarily make a distinction between on-platform and off-platform views. They're kind of aggregated into one big number of views. And that the reach that you can get from something like Facebook is a reach beyond even what the Guardian would be able to do. So I feel quite lucky in that way, because it's really, really core to the Guardian's video strategy.
You're not having to have that conversation. It is just we can partner. And this
No. I mean,
do.
if anything, I sometimes have to resist us going too crazy on off-platform, because the attitude of, understandably, the attitude of our partnerships team is that the more partnerships we can do with other platforms, the better. Yeah. Which I agree with to some extent, but I think if you're literally everywhere on every single platform, sometimes they do cannibalise views on other platforms.
And this is not the place to pitch your idea at Charlie, because we're trying to have this kind of informal conversation and that kind of approach. But I did want to get a bit of your take on you're doing online commissioning, so your kind of take on that, and maybe with a couple of examples of films or filmmakers that have kind of stood out for you.
Yeah, sure. So our remit is that we want to tell stories. So we're really it's really important to us to have stories that take you on a journey and have a complete narrative arc. And that's not so much a taste thing, that's more responding to what the Guardian's audience expect, because they are an audience who are used to coming for news, and they're used to being told the complete story. The slogan of The Guardian used to be the whole picture, and that feeds into what I commission. So it's important that the film takes you to a different place at the end from where you started. So the story is really important. We always think globally. Only a third of our audience is based in the UK, so we have to tell global stories from global filmmakers for global audiences. So it can't be anything that's too region specific. And we will only ever do contemporary stories. We never do history. We always do things that feel relevant to right now. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. And the ideal films combine a human story with a deeper social or political significance. So the most successful doc we did was a film called Too Black for TV, which was about a Brazilian carnival queen who was dethroned from being carnival queen for being considered to have too dark skin. And it's her story from beginning to end, pretty much, but it also has an interesting social analysis running beneath it, and it does all of that in under 10 minutes. So that's a good example. But then equally, we did a film that I really love about the Night Wolves, who are a Russian biker gang who are Putin's private militia in eastern Ukraine. And that is just a really interesting character piece. Nothing really happens in the film. It's a study in boredom and a study in masculinity. So we can do that kind of film if the access is great and the characters are really compelling.
And I wondered for the shorts filmmakers out there who do approach you, what have been some of their hurdles when they've come to say, okay, I've got this idea. Are there kind of falling points at which they're not able to quite make it in terms of that commissioning?
Yeah, I mean, it's when people pitch you a subject rather than a story, or an issue rather than a story, and that's not really what we do. We want narratives, and I'm interested in everything as a person, and like every subject pretty much is interesting, but it's all about how you tell it within a narrative, and that's often what people fall down on, or it's duplicating something that's already out there. So I'm sort of aware it's really frustrating for filmmakers, but often people will pitch me things, and then just through a very cursory search of the Guardian site, I can see that we've already covered it in a lot of depth, and that applies to things like most refugee stories, unfortunately, unless it's bringing a new angle to it. It just won't get the attention on our site. And The Guardian is a very specific space for how people consume our content. It has to complement our written material, our audio material. It can't duplicate the information that we're already putting out there.
Yeah, and then kind of thinking about that to Black for TV. So that I think it's really interesting that you're able to make those films. In contrast, and get those films out there in contrast to what we do see on mainstream TV. So it really is an opportunity, I think. And we talked very briefly about diversity and how talent gets into and is involved in festivals and so on. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about around diversity and developing talent and that from that kind of angle.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, because it is, I think we all give lip service to diversity, and we all, and by we I mean commissioners, but also festival organisers and anyone who's a kind of gatekeeper. I think we talk about wanting to open up the space to women, people of colour, people on low incomes, but in practice you often don't see it because people are limited in time, or they just don't know how to find those people. And I think that I worry that we don't have the training programs that we used to have, and I worry that it's prohibitively expensive to get access to the industry. And I don't have all of the answers for that, but I do think that it's a conversation that is really important to have. And I don't know if people read the article that Leia Borromeo wrote, which was the kind of provocation that was that went up yesterday, I think, that was basically saying that DocFest is too expensive for people on low incomes. And I've got a lot of things that I would argue with in that article, but I think it's quite interesting to ask that question, and it's something that I'm going to be thinking a lot about in the next lot of films I'm commissioning, because I do think you have to actively be looking to voices that aren't heard enough, and not just go for the easiest filmmakers and the easiest pitches. But it's a lot of effort to seek people out, and you can't do it on your own. And I think a lot of it does play into there being the right training programs, in there being a wider diversity of people accepted into film schools. There's a lot of factors.
I think there's a great opportunity for partnership around thinking about diversity, because if it can be, there's pressure from the outside, both from the filmmakers, but also that there are partnerships that say this is important, then that becomes an opportunity to create change across the sector. So I would say, people should push for that change on the inside and on the outside, and that creates those opportunities. But I
think, sorry, just to jump in there, I'm kind of conscious working at The Guardian that we are like one of the world's major liberal media voices, but when you look at the people within the organisation, it is quite a narrow section of society in terms of the people who are employed by The Guardian, and I include me in that. I'm white, middle class, I went to Cambridge, I'm like, I got offered the job and I'm doing it, but I think that I think you can end up giving space to the voices that most match your own voice, and that's totally a problem that is acknowledged in The Guardian, and it's something that we want to deal with, but I think it's something that we could really do with acknowledging more and actually taking action on.
And you're head of documentary, man of one, team of one, but there are things that you can do, right? There are things that you can do, and I think on my side, I run a social enterprise and work with culturally diverse filmmakers and artists, and the bit that I try and do is open up the possibility that their work is seen, not just it's about their diverse voices, but I'm very clear about how I support them both in their work as filmmakers, but in their other work that they do, because often there's that balance as filmmakers. How do you make an income out of being a filmmaker? It's very difficult to. So I try and find ways that I can develop that people have another income stream as well as their creative work is paid for, which is, it can be quite hard work, but if you're in control of earning some of your own money, that development phase that costs so much and is the bit that makes the social mobility so difficult. If you've got money and you come from that background, you've got that support. If you don't have that support. So that's the kind of bit that I try and work on.
Yeah, and it is when I speak of diversity, I am really thinking about people on low income as well as people of colour and women and everything else. Because I really feel like if you're on a low income, you're really excluded, possibly more excluded than anyone else. Like the documentary industry feels really middle class to me. And yes, I say that as a middle class person, but it's something that I think we really need to break. Otherwise, we're not going to get the access to stories that we really need to get. And I think you see that in. I'm not just talking about the documentary coverage that I do, but I'm also thinking about the news coverage that The Guardian provides and lots of other mainstream media, where if you look at something like the EU referendum, you so rarely hear from anyone outside of a kind of political bubble. You very rarely hear from people outside of London on their views. And this is just a kind of, it's barely even considered because everyone's giving voices to the people who most look like themselves.
I think it's about going to where those people are. And speaking of that, let's go to some of the short filmmakers who will have questions. So let's look for some questions. There must be.
You don't have to be a short filmmaker.
No,
you could also be
no.
a long filmmaker.
We've got
There
one
you
at the
go.
back there. There we go. Gentleman at the back.
Hi. You mentioned unheard voices. In your opinion, what is the most unheard voice in the UK at the moment?
Well, I wouldn't really know because I wouldn't have heard them. No, it's true though.
Very good answer.
It's true though. That's kind of my point, that I don't know because I.
Right. Yeah. No, it's good.
I'll tell you when I hear them, although then it'll be disproven.
Have you been approached by filmmakers that work within that are disabled filmmakers that might have a slightly different take on the world?
I mean, actually, it's kind of interesting because mostly I get pitched over email or phone. So often, you really are being, colourblind and like ability blind, which is a really good thing, obviously. So actually, often I wouldn't know. So I have been. But I've probably been approached by people who are disabled and I'm not even aware of it.
And you've got no awareness of it. It's really interesting because Alex Osborne, I don't know if he's here, but he runs 101 Films and he's Sheffield based and he is purely supporting disabled talent and has got some fantastic films that are getting out there. So there are production companies that are supporting culturally diverse filmmakers. Sometimes it's knowing who's out, possibly the producers who are out there.
Yeah, and it's not at all about being tokenistic.
Yeah.
It's not about saying,
No.
I'm going to go to Alex and commission my entire slate from him. It's about making sure that people feel like they've got access to people like me. And at the moment, it really feels like they don't. And it's troubling.
But what I'm saying is that an Alex has some talent and can push the... do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And there might be many more of those Alexes out there that should be,
But then I'm not sure if there are many Alexes. Like, I think there's him in Sheffield and he's got a small number of people, but I wonder if there are more people like him.
Yeah. But so maybe that's something to think about on your kind of commissioning angle. Any more questions? We've got one at the front here.
Hi there. You talked about getting different sorts of people into the industry in the way that you work. Have you considered working with people who are currently, you mentioned training programs and different types of training programs. Are you working and screening and commissioning things with people whilst they're still part of training programs, or do you tend to only deal with people once they've been through that process?
I mean, I judge people on the stories that they pitch to me. So if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And I work really closely with everyone I commission to help them make the film the best they can be, because I exec all the films as well as commission them. I also have a limited number of slots, so we're only going to do 20-ish films in the next year. So there's a lot of competition for those slots, and you have to go for the films that you think are going to be the best films. I don't often have people who are running training programs or nurturing new talent coming to me and like pushing them in my face, and I would really like that to happen more, because if you've got an industry luminary giving them a mark of respect, then it makes it less of a risk for me to have that conversation and work with them rather than them approaching me cold. So I definitely like it if people who are representing new talent or underrepresented talent came to me and helped me to connect with those people. It happens surprisingly rarely.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that because that's part of my job.
It's good. I mean, I'll give an example. Like, I was taking meetings in the Future Producer School this morning, which is a training program that DocFest run with Worldview, and that was really interesting. That was, I mean, they're quite experienced producers in some ways. They're looking for their next big break, but that was good because you get to do quick meetings with them, and they know who you are, and you know who they are, and then it sets up a basis for having further conversations. And you're less intimidating as a commissioner when someone's met you face to face.
Thanks.
We've got a few more questions. Let's go to the front here with this lady.
So if you're like a marginalised person, you're less likely to value your opinions as being like important or significant in the first place. So even if development programmes do exist to provide social mobility, you won't even get to that stage. So how are commissioners and things meant to encourage more marginalised people to even take the step to even apply for development programmes and things like that, which don't really exist vastly anyway?
Well, like I really feel a responsibility to get out and go and meet people, and that's why I travel so much all the time. So that's really that's one thing that I, as a commissioner, can do, is like get out there, talk to people in a kind of unmediated way. But I'm just one person, and that's replicated in a lot of other commissioners or people who are setting up training programs. They can't reach everyone, and that's a kind of inevitable thing. I don't really know how you break through that other than trying to continuously have industry representatives going out and looking for the right people. And actually, like DocFest do a really good job of doing training programs where they try and reach out to people who maybe don't have access to the industry. But there really is an issue, and I do think a lot of that comes back to income. That if you're from a low-income family, you're probably not even considering going to an expensive film school or going on an expensive training course or even buying an expensive delegate pass to come to Sheffield. So it totally is a problem.
I mean, I wonder if there's this missing bit of the kind of talent pipeline then that presents the opportunity for partnership. I remember I used to work for B3 Media in London, and we used to commission documentaries, but with the Film Council and the Arts Council, and to create this pipeline that was, we went into theatre spaces and art space, and so we were really looking for people, and then the next step on was that you had this opportunity to work with more mainstream commissioners. But the challenge with working more mainstream commissioners is often their take on your idea would change for a mainstream audience. So there is still something about that mainstream, non-mainstream. But let's have some more questions. This gentleman in the middle.
This isn't exactly a question about diversity and access to the industry. I mean, I am diverse, but I have the good fortune to feel I've got pretty good access to the industry. But this is a question from a filmmaker who might potentially be interested in pitching to you. And I wonder, how do you differentiate your strand from New York Times docs, Vice docs, and any other relevant peers that we could compare with what you do?
I mean, I don't really like speaking for other platforms because I don't think it's fair. But because I'm just focusing on what we're doing, I think that there's a different style of doc between all of those different platforms. I think probably the place that we're most similar to is the New York Times, because we're coming out of a news organisation culture. Here it is. their films technically are supposed to be like come out of the op-ed departments. They're supposed to be filmmaker opinion led, although actually they're a lot more diverse than that. There's a great range of films on there. I think the best way for people to see the differences between them is just to watch films on all of these platforms. I've also brought up Field of Vision. AJ, who looks after that, I think he's gone, but he was here. So the best thing is to watch it. There's lots of good docs on all of these platforms, and just watch them and see. And then there's no problem with pitching your ideas to all of these platforms and seeing who goes for it. I'm doing a panel on Tuesday morning that's a short online commissioning panel where I guess you'll hear a bit more. It's not every platform is represented on there, but there'll be a bit more info there. Slightly, I think, like if you were pitching to any different TV channel, you'd configure that pitch in a slightly different way. But I'd do your research beforehand and then configure your pitch to represent that. It's like most commissions. If people come to me, pitch an idea, and they've not watched any of our films, then I don't get annoyed about it. But you might as well have watched those, and then it gets over that lengthy conversation at the start where I try and explain what our films look like.
So I've just heard the bell sound, which means that we're out of time. But Charlie, are you going to hang about for a little bit and chat with people?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I did want to have one final thing from you, which was about what you're excited about. So thinking about the future of that online space, are there things coming up for you that you could just mention?
Well, we've got quite a few new films that are going to start launching from the summer. We're going to have a redesigned platform for the docs. We're doing a new strand of films in partnership with the Bertha Foundation. We are moving towards doing mostly longer shorts, so closer to 20 minutes or even more, because we want to see if we can make it more of a lean-back experience. So I'm excited about deepening the work on the docs at The Guardian. And I'm also excited about more platforms like The Guardian and Field of Vision and OpDocs emerging, because I think it's a really interesting and viable alternative space to broadcast, and I do think it means you get a wider range of voices and a wider range of stories getting out there into the world.
And on that diversity note, I think Kiki is an example film of an activist working with the filmmaker to get that story kind of co-written. That's a fantastic example to have a look at that film, Kiki. So just without further ado, to thank Charlie in the normal manner, thank you so much for giving us your time and your insights.